All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're so glad to be here with all of you, both in person and online, to welcome our friend, now we're Yaffa, who is an incredible poet and community organizer who we have had the honor of hosting before. And we're really glad to have them back here tonight. We're here in honor of their new book, Sage, which is a poetry collection that highlights challenges and joy within interpersonal relationships from the perspective of a queer and trans Palestinian. Mx.Yaffa is an author and storyteller who paves the way for us to imagine utopia through every word. Having shared their story with over 300,000 audience members at speaking events globally, Mx.Yaffa is an acclaimed disabled, autistic, trans, queer, Muslim, and indigenous Palestinian individual who has received multiple awards for their transformative work around displacement, decolonization, equity, and centering the lived experiences of individuals most impacted by injustice. Mx.Yaffa is the executive director of Muslim Alliance for Sexual and Gender Diversity, as well as the founder of several nonprofits and community projects. They are an engineer, death and birthing doula, peer support specialist, consultant, and artist. And we're joined tonight by our friends from the Refaat Mobile Library. The Refaat Mobile Library, yes, yay! The Refaat Mobile Library is a traveling memorial library created in honor of Refaat Alair, the beloved Palestinian poet and educator who was killed by an Israeli airstrike in December of now 2 years ago. The volunteer run mobile library travels all over Atlanta, bringing Palestinian, anti Zionist, and indigenous literature rooted in collective liberation to protest trainings, divestment teach ins, college graduations, community markets, charity basketball games, festivals, galleries, and more. If you're interested in contributing to the library, you can explore our Charis wish list, which I'll drop in the chat for our online folks. You can follow them on Instagram, which I will also drop, as well as Twitter. And for regular updates, you can also check online and visit their website. So thank you always to the Refaat Mobile Library for being such an incredible partner to Charis and to our community. We're always so delighted to have you all in the house. So I was driving here and saw a beautiful protest on the Beltline, a pro-Palestinian protest, people waving Palestinian flags, signs, chanting, and it felt like, obviously timely that you were coming. And also, I've been thinking a lot about how do we keep the spirit of protest alive as the war goes on and on and on. And so, poetry is a way to keep protest alive in our hearts and in our spirits. And your work is so important for doing that. And also keeping joy and care and all of the things that you do so well alive. So thank you so much for being with us. We're very honored to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, amazing. I went on like vocal rest earlier in the week, and so my body is still like, what are words? We're we're supposed to talk out loud. But I also realized the last time I lost my voice several months ago that I think. I don't know if anyone relates to that, but like where like my thoughts do not stay in my head. I'm just constantly in a state of talking to myself. And no one has told me for 32 years. Oh, peoples. Um, but I'm so excited to be here with you all. Yeah, it's so nice to be back in Atlanta in the bookstore, um, in community with the Refaat library. Yeah, just so excited to be back here, and in particular with this book. Um, so I think I think we did this last time of like I had mentioned this last time of like definitely feel free to ask questions along the way. You don't have to wait until the very end to ask questions. Because I don't know about you all, but like within my autism, if like I have a question 5 minutes into a talk and I'm not allowed to ask it, I will be thinking about the question so that I don't forget the question. You would think that they never invented like writing tools for me to just write down my question, but no. I'm going to be thinking about it, and then I will forget the question and not listen to anything that's been said. So if you're like me and you need to ask a question, feel free to ask a question. If it's not the time for it, I will let you know. I'm very comfortable being like, no. Or I will tell you your question is basic and we will complicate it further, right? Like, I'm comfortable doing that. And so I want to invite y'all to also be comfortable in asking questions. Um, because this conversation isn't, I mean, it's about me, but it's not about me, if that makes sense, right? I know what I live with. I know the conversations in my head. We're bringing this into a broader group of people, into the community. And so definitely feel free to ask questions and share reflections and whatever else you feel inspired to. So I want to start tonight's conversation with just reading the dedication of the book. And it's on page 7 if you had a copy and you wanted to follow along. But it's this book is dedicated to the divine who are deemed too radiant to be free and are hunted, punished, and restricted. May you never forget that no cage can hold the infinite. And I want to start with that because I think sometimes when we have conversations about political moments and what's happening in the world and experiences, they almost become theoretical. They become this distant thing when everything that we're talking about is a lived reality for literally millions of people. And there are consequences to lived realities for millions of people. And so as I speak, trans people are being disappeared and harmed, and genocide is ongoing, multiple genocides, way too many genocides, a number that's potentially increasing, right, versus decreasing. And that's the genocides that we name versus the genocides we don't name, right? And so I don't even want to try to go down a list because it will be way too long of a list. And so I want to just invite us to remember that as we talk about this, of like, this is impacting people outside of this space that we will never know about, that we will never be in conversation with, that will never share their stories, because that requires access and it requires power and it requires so many different things. And also, there's 8 billion people. We'll never know all the stories of 8 billion people, or even 1% of that, right? We will just know the slimmest percentage of that. But when we do that, then we assume things become theoretical, they become distant. But all of it is real in different ways. So I want to start off with one of the poems, and I sort of knew which one I wanted to share, but now I'm like, ooh, let me share all of them. um, all right, but I'll share the one I had in mind, and then we'll share some of the others. So this one's on page 83, and it's called Problem. And afterwards, I'll talk a little bit about where this book came from and why it's here in this moment in time. It's called Problem. Am I the problem? I ask myself again and again for decades, knowing that there's never a single problem, just wounds of being that prick one another. They say, I have seen you turn off every relationship you have. A lie, and yet it circles my mind, a sun headache pressuring my forehead, begging for release, or something I'm not sure what. Am I the problem when I am the disposable one? She says, we didn't mean it that way. Why do you take it this way? Another's cancer metastasized. I am an unpaid caregiver begging for connection, giving it all up. Another lies, asks for labor that is not rightfully hers. The right name, the pronouns, the work, all of it not honored. I am not honored. Am I the problem? A Leo cancer begging for attention and love. I must be when everyone has left again and again. Then I remind myself that these societies are white supremacist and transmissic and so much more. Am I the problem, or is being everything I am the problem? Either way, I am the problem. Thank you. So I forgot about that poem until I picked up this copy in the front and then opened it and it was there. But I feel like it kind of captures the essence of the history of where this book comes from. So a lot of the writings that have been published since October 7th have actually been written since October 7th. They've been in direct response to October 7th. This book is a little bit different. This book actually started as a chapbook about 6 months before October 7th when I cut off one of my sisters. And it was the first sister that I cut off. Someone asked me actually in Denver, not this trip, the previous trip. And they were like, so you write in your books about cutting off a family member, a sister. Have you reconciled since then? I was like, no. And I cut off more of them. I'm so excited. And so we have not reconciled. um, but it was, and this is where like this book really comes in. So this was about around May 2023, so about 6 months before October 7th, and I had a falling out with one of my sisters due to transphobia. And it's not that the rest of my sisters were not transphobic, it just within my family, and I have a pretty big family, so I have 7 sisters, which just means the universe gave me enough to cut off so many of them. I can cut out at least 5 and we're still a pretty big family. Like we're good. And so I'm like, even if I like you, listen. Like we need like survival style, like voting off an island somewhere. I'm like, I don't have time for all of you. And so lots of sisters, but and they're really wonderful sisters that I raised. I take full credit for them being wonderful. And then there's 2 other camps of sisters, and it's not that one camp is way more like transphobic than the other. One camp really just doesn't understand most things about the world, and but they're very rooted in more of my interpretation of Palestinian culture, of how we move through conflict and disagreement. And then the other camp is very assimilated more towards like global north ways of moving through conflict and disagreement. So the first camp are and they don't do this anymore, right? They're on their best behaviors. But like years ago, my oldest sister, for example, would be like, I don't understand transness. I'm like, go away. And she's like, okay, here, talk to my children, right? Or okay, fine, I'm coming over with a cheesecake. And she's not coming over with a cheesecake to talk about it. Like she's not like, okay, we're gonna talk over food now. No, it's just like that was it. Like she's like, I don't get it. I'm like, go away. And she's like, okay, here you go. Right? Talk to my children, leave me alone. Right? It's very cut and dry. It's just very like, okay, we disagreed. We don't there's no generative piece of this. Cool. Nothing shifts. So that camp I still talk to because I'm like, I don't actually care about your understanding of the things. I care about your violence, right? I care about what you do in the world. And to me, that's a very Palestinian way of moving through conflict where, like, I mean, usually there would be a lot more yelling and things like that, but we're going to yell over dinner. And then by dessert, like, we're good. But, like, no one's walking away, right? Like, there is no, we disagree on this. And so you don't get dessert with us, right? Like, it's just like, okay, cool. I might throw a shoe at you, but we're going to have dessert. It's going to be good dessert. Yeah, there's no disowning, right? There, whereas within, I find within like the global north context of it, and that's the second camp of it. The second camp is very much if we disagree, if we have conflict, then we have boundaries. And boundaries mean you're not allowed to talk to my children anymore, right? And and that's what happened with this sister, right? It was related to her kids, and that's the one line that I'm like, there is no negotiations around that line, right? Of like, if you don't get it, if you're a mess, you're whatever, that's one thing. But to then have consequences to that disagreement. And nowadays, 2 years later, right, like my line has shifted, where now my line is basically like, if you're not doing good shit for the world, I don't have time for you. Like, I don't care if you're transphobic. I don't care if you're not transphobic. I don't have time. right? Like I said, I have a lot of sisters, even the sisters I like. I'm like, unless you're doing something, like I don't have time for you. Like I love you and goodbye. I am busy. Literally, I am busy. We will talk later. And so for some of them where I'm like, wait, you're not doing anything and you're transphobic and you still want to be here? No, we don't do that shit. Um, and I think for me though, and again, this is where this book really comes in, because so that experience happened with my sister in May 2023. The thing with that experience though is that during that same week, a lot of queer and trans Muslims had falling outs with their families as well in what's known as the US and Canada. And the reason for that is because about 200 different scholars at the time went and released a statement that said they don't have to tolerate queer and trans people, right? And they didn't name queer and trans Muslims. They completely erased us, like we don't exist. But they created this structure where the single statement, though, was felt throughout both of those countries, right? In people's households. Now, the thing is, my sister didn't read that statement. My sister doesn't know about that statement. But this is how systems work, right? Of like a single thing can happen somewhere else, thousands of miles away, and yet it reverberates into people's households, into our relationships. And so this book is very much trying to balance the reality of like, actually, all of this is systemic, right? Like transphobia did not exist because of a single person. It is so deeply systemic. All of these interactions, right, that are interpersonal, that are so harmful, are systemic. They're rooted in something. Somebody taught somebody something. And usually you can try to like map it out and you can find the legacy of where it's coming from. But the person who's doing the violence usually does not actually know where it's coming from. They don't know that history. But usually we do, those of us interacting with that violence who are facing it. And so for me, though, it's like that balance of that recognition of, and I've known this for a really, really, really long time. Most of my work is around systemic violence, right? And systems of oppression. And also, y'all, the interpersonal stuff really hurts, right? Like, it's not like, oh, I can blame a giant system. And so actually, like, everything is fine. Like, no, it really sucks. And for me, I'm also like, and I will hold people to a much higher standard. Like, I'm like, I can understand why you are the way that you are. I can despise it. And also, I need you to do better. Like, I don't have time for me to just be like, yeah, I can blame a government somewhere and nation states and white supremacy and so on and so forth. But if you're going to be in relationship with me, I need you to show up. That's work that you need to do. I can give you grace. I don't need to hate you. Although I do like hating people. I I identify as a person who abundantly hates and abundantly loves. And I find it's only people who are not willing to say they hate things or peoples and like behaviors that are the most hateful. So like all my sisters will be like, oh, we would never hate trans people. I'm like, yes, you do. You want us dead. That is hatred. And they're like, oh, how could you? Whereas I'll be like, yeah, actually, I do hate everyone. And also, I will work with everyone when it's strategic to work with everyone because let's get the shit done. Let's actually do this. I think so. In some ways, I think so. The question was, is there a connection between like the denial of the hatred and the historical context, the historical violence? I think it, I write about this in some of my other works. I don't know how much. I don't usually remember what I write in anything, to be honest. And so, but I do write about this, right? Where the thing with systems of oppression, right, is that they have culture. And because everything's culture, right? Everything can be culture. Everything is a way of being. Everything can be a tradition. although then we're also taught that culture and tradition are really good things. And it's like, no, girl, have you not met like fascist culture? Right? Like culture, tradition, all those things, they're not inherently good. They're not inherently bad. Nothing is really inherently good or bad. Things just are. But within that culture, there is this idea of what it means to be a good person, right? What it means to be a person who's like protecting your loved ones and taking care of people. And I think people get lost in those dimensions of what culture is without understanding what culture is, right? And where it comes from. And the historical context of culture are usually deeply violent, right? Like culture in like can be really, really beautiful. And also it could be really, really, really exclusionary, right? Because then it's like, if we have to protect just us from every single person outside of the space, that can become incredibly violent. And I think with my sisters, like with so many people, I think the way they internalize things is actually they're the good people, right? And so they're not and to them within that culture, within systemic oppression, if you say that you hate someone or something, that makes you bad. You're no longer that good person, right? You're no longer the moral person and the ethical person, whatever other words they want to use. And so to them, they're like, it's a sense of self goodness that I find just permeates everywhere. And it's systemic, right? And it's there on purpose for a reason, because it's that sense of righteousness that then goes and gets some people to be like, because I am, because we are different, I am better than you, and thus you now must be punished. But the punishment is seen as protection for the community, right? And so for my sisters, they're like, and there's two of them that I have cut out, and mostly because they brought their kids into their violence. Two, I don't necessarily talk to, but we're not like cut off, if that makes sense. We're just, we see each other when we see each other. Um, but for them, they're protecting their children, right, from this other culture that then, due to pinkwashing, right, and the internalized pinkwashing, then is seen as they're actually protecting their kids from white supremacy by protecting their kids from me. And it's a cycle, right? And it doesn't make sense, but it also makes sense. But it's right. But the thing is, though, I think part of the problem is that those of us experiencing violence are usually the ones who are sitting here reflecting on this, right? We're the ones talking about it. And so we can map it out. We could build so many grace pathways for everyone who's been violent to us. But people who are committing the violence are not necessarily here, right? And and then there's also complexity within that, right? Because sometimes when it's not our lived identity, we can assume that we are not the violent ones, but we actually still are. But it's like, it, like it's like when I go and train people. So I used to do a lot of mental health trainings back in the day, and I still do like death work trainings and birthing work trainings and um, all kinds of trainings. Now it's a lot more organizing trainings, right? So different intensives. But when I was doing a lot of more of the mental health work or the death work or the birthing work, I hated training in urban cities or metropolitan areas because, and usually my trainings were 2 full weeks, so it's 80 hours, right? And so people would get together in a room 8 hours a day for 10 full days, right? 2 full weeks. And we can go into everything, right? Like the amount of shit that you can get done in 2 weeks is incredible. And I would go into these rural communities that are on paper the really, really bad ones. And I would love training there, right? Because I'd walk into the room and they're like, what the fuck are you? Right? Like in slightly nicer words, but like it's immediate, right? Like it's from the beginning. They're like, what are pronouns? What is your name? Why? Right? And their nervous systems are so shocked, but they're willing to put it out there, right? And so within like a couple of days, people have moved forward, right? Within a couple of days, we're talking about dismantling the entire mental health system, right? Like we're going to fully go there. Metropolitan areas, though, and urban cities, more people are better with pronouns, better loosely. They think they're really good at pronouns. They think they're really good at names. They're really good at so many things, but they refuse to acknowledge that they are the problem. And I don't know any room where we are not all the problem, right? And going back to that poem, right, of like within that context of like maybe not necessarily the problem with my sister, but like we are all the problem at one point in time. And our willingness to admit that is what allows us to move forward. And and so within those urban cities, it would be like 8 full days of training to like fully break down that they are the problem. And by Thursday, the second week, people are finally like, wow, I'm a turf. I'm like, yes, I told you day one, right? Like I told you before you came into the room, but they finally get it. But but now we don't have more time to actually fix it, right? And it's still good, right? It's still something. We love it. I can appreciate that because we've broken down this idea of that self-righteousness from the other end of it, of that I'm still a good person because I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, you're still not a good person. And it's not about that. It's about so much more. Um, but so to me, that's like the worst thing that can happen is when people are like, no, actually, I'm good. I don't need to grow. I don't need to learn. Like, I'm like, then why are we alive? Like, why are we here? We all have room to grow and things to do and all of it. But back to the point of like, usually the most problematic people are not in these spaces. And usually when people are in these spaces, a lot of that assumption is actually like, we're the good ones. Like, right. And so then we create a culture of like, we are the righteous ones and we don't have work to do. And I always want to invite people, and there's different poems that go into this within the collection. See if I can find one. But here we're talking about transphobia, right? We're talking about transmisic violence. We're talking about a lot of different things. But I want to invite y'all to really think, like, expand that to things outside of that. And I'll give you all an example of I did surgery in Jordan a couple months ago, and I stayed with my parents for the first couple of weeks of recovery. The worst part of recovery was being in the house, to be honest. Love my parents, but they're not good caretakers. They almost killed me multiple times, but they don't hate me, so they actually really don't. But like my parents are sort of okay-ish. We have work to do, whatever. But anyways, but my oldest sister was there one day, and this is after the first 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks, I couldn't talk, I couldn't move. It was a lot of like inner ear things, nose things, like, and so I couldn't really get up. I couldn't open my mouth. It was a lot of weird things. But by the time I could talk, a couple of weeks later, my oldest sister was there, and she's one of the ones who doesn't really understand transness, right? She just doesn't, and um, and so she's one of the ones I don't really talk to, but we're not like cut off. We just, if we have a reason to talk to one another, if I am in Jordan, I will see her and her kids. If I am not in Jordan, like we're not really going to talk. So it's like we're fine, whatever. But anyways, and so she was looking at the news, and it's a Palestinian household, so Al Jazeera is on 100% of the time, and so everything genocide is just blasting in the background. And she was like, I don't understand how people can be okay with just killing so many people. And I was like, well, it's taken you over 10 years to get even my pronouns right, knowing that it harms me. But it's taken 10 years for you to like recognize that. And so, in the same way, people become desensitized to different things, knowing that it's harmful, but because they don't see it and they don't believe it, it doesn't matter. And so genocide happens. And she didn't say anything. and she didn't adjust her behavior. Right. And so I want to invite people to really think about that, of like, where are the areas of work that you have that you need to do? Because we all have it. None of us know everything. None of us know the most marginalized of the most marginalized. Like, my work has always been with the most marginalized of the most marginalized, but that's a group that's constantly shifting, right? And so I can have access to a certain part of it, but I still don't have access to 99% of it. And so, where are your areas of growth? What are you feeling inspired to move towards? Again, recognizing of that, like, if we start with actually I'm good, means we've ended that journey. That's when we've set ourselves up for failure. But if we start with like, actually, yeah, I am also the problem, right? Like, I'm capable of being the problem. It is human to be the problem. And also, it is human to be accountable and to grow and to move forward and be all of the amazing things that we are. So I'll pause there. Any questions, thoughts as I pull up the next poem? I mostly don't know which poem we're reading. And so, all right, 1 second. Oh, we read that one. I love the work that I've done within myself, because as I like flip through work that I've done, I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. I know not everyone is there, but I send you all love to practice that. Um, um, we're gonna find it. Okay, I'm gonna read this poem, and then I'll read one other one. Um, I think, yeah. So Eid is coming up in a few weeks. Um, and so the context of my visit to my sister was actually, so my younger sister, these two sisters were sort of involved in the story. One of the younger of one of the ones I raised, good one, was coming to visit me in my home. But I was like, let's go visit the other sister who has two twins, because she can't move like we can. And so let's go hang out with her. Kindness. Yes. And so it was for Eid. And so we were there for 5 days, and the whole situation ensued during that time frame. Um, that resulted in me like fully cutting her off. But because it was Eid, and because I run a queer and trans Muslim org, it also means that there was a lot of beauty and love and celebration within that community. So this poem is called Eid, on page 16, that I wrote on Eid during a queer Muslim hangout. So Eid. Ringing bells and the smells of ma'mul, takbirat in the distance dancing to my heartbeat. My dress is gold and blue, purple and ruby. I am draped in silk and embroidery, all the things at once and separately. Capes and heels, summer hats in the winter, prayer gliding over sand dunes and hiking trails, by rivers and oceans and forests of emerald and grace, embraces from regalia from every corner of the world, at home and a tourist, wise and yearning to learn. I am balance. I am aid. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to share that poem because there's a lot of violence happening in the world. There's a lot happening. And I think even for me, sometimes that can get overwhelming in a way that could become immobilizing in different ways. And I think for me, though, that's just one side of the story, right? Of even this experience with a sister, of she's not relevant enough to be my entire world, right? And I choose to make people who aren't building liberatory worlds as irrelevant as possible. And to me, we do that through the joy that exists within our people. And I say that as a Palestinian, I say that as a trans person, as a queer person, as a disabled person, as all of the things of there's so many things that want to just destroy everything that we are. I'll read one more poem kind of about that. But I'm like, okay, like try harder, I guess. I don't like you are failing. I don't know what to tell you. Like, good try. But like I'm just like you don't get to take everything that we are because everything that we are is so much that you can be a small slice of it, but ultimately like you're not relevant in those ways. Right. And so this experience with the sister was really impactful and really, it was a lot of things. And then it became even more things because of the systemic pieces. And then working with so many other people who had gone through the same experiences and potentially so much worse than those experiences. And then working with other people and other people. And then a genocide starting. And then if y'all remember, like April was also when the genocide in Sudan started in 2023, right? And so like, so that was happening, and this is happening, and so much is happening, and also at the same time, we can still make time slices of spaces where we get to be all the things and bring all the magic that we are. And when I think of this work, when I think of organizing, when I think of mobilizing people, when I think of the revolution, when I think of all of it, like I don't have this idea of like it's a romanticized idea of the revolution of like it starts at 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. It's going to be done at 3 p.m. We're going to go to dinner after. Like that's not going to happen, right? Like I kind of expect that I will probably lose every single person that's close to me. And also at the same time, I'm like, but we're going to be laughing throughout. And yes, we're going to be holding insurmountable amounts of grief and pain and everything. And yes, my ankles are going to be killing me because I will wear fabulous shoes to the revolution, right? But it's all of the things. It's not just one or the other. And I think for me, when I think of that, right, when I think of the worst pieces of the revolution, the most painful pieces, I also know that they're happening today, anyways, right? And so I want us to move towards that. And I don't say that as like us coming together into space is inherently the greatest form of resistance. I've actually been talking about that quite a lot at different events because, like, how many of y'all have heard that like our existence is resistance? I'm like, okay, cute, and um, like a fascistic person's existence is also resistance against liberation, and like it means nothing. Like it's cute, but like why, how, when, where? And also, I'm not just here for resistance. Like I'm here for literally remaking the entire fucking world, and that's more than resistance. That's not just like I woke up this morning and so we're good. I love that I woke up this morning. I love that I'm here. I love that I look this fabulous. I love all the things. I was actually thinking about that of like my self talk is so great because like I walked into my hotel and I'm just like, oh, Yaffa, I love you. And I want everyone to like go to that, right? Because that wasn't the case 15 years ago, before I started doing so much of this work within myself and within community. But I need us to do more. I want more, right? For us to actually be really transformative beings. I'm like, cool, like, what are we doing with that? Right? Like, how are we fully remaking the world and moving towards collective liberation? Because I believe that we can. I believe that it will happen, regardless of certain individuals. I think we're going to totally get there. But I'm also like, yeah, let's fucking use everything. And so when I think of that space with the other queer Muslims, of like, there was so much beauty in it, but it was also fuel. It was also, there were next steps. There was, here's what we're doing to shift different things, right? Here's how we're going to protect certain people. Here's how we're supporting people when they are cut off from their families or when they cut off their families. Yeah, I find within a lot of my communities, it's actually like the queer and trans people, we will cut out families, which I think is great. Versus family disowns us, right? Which is the more common narrative, right? Because we're taught that, like, and I was reflecting about this actually probably around that time, even like with my relationship with my mom, where it was like, or no, maybe actually like around October 7th, I was reflecting on this, where, my parents have generally been pretty great around a lot of different things. But I was like, I still don't like you, right? Like, I don't need to just like you just because you're not transphobic. Like, that is not the bar, right? Like, I need so much more. And I like them more now. But that's because I went and acknowledged that. They were not happy that I acknowledged that. Right? Because again, in their heads, we all like each other. We all love each other. We all are all the things. And I'm like, no, actually, nobody likes anybody. Right? Like, but we can, right? We can build those relationships. Um, it, and so, yeah, so within that space, it was just, it's all of those things. It's meant to be a building block. Now, at the same time, I'm sure there are people that were in that space that haven't done a single thing since. And that's okay on one hand, right? Like, I can't force everyone to be revolutionary, but it also means that I get to determine my relationships with people and how I move in the world. And for me, like, I feel like I've made it very abundantly clear to everybody I am around, both strangers, very publicly and very privately. I'm like, I can love you and not have you anywhere near my life because I just don't have time for people who aren't world builders. And it's not saying world builders as in like you have to go and literally be doing everything and like running the whole Refaat like public library, right? Like, I'm not talking about like do enormous things. I'm just like, what are you doing? And if I can't get an answer, if I and less of like your word of an answer, but if I can't feel any of it, if like, and there are some underground organizers, but like we're not talking about that, right? Like, I'm like, I can love you and you could be my best friend, but like also I'm totally cutting you off because like I just don't like, I don't have time. And also we don't have the same values. So bye. And it's nice to let go. All right, so I'm gonna read this last poem and then we'll do a couple of questions before we wrap up. Um, so this one's called Erase. It's on page 39. And I'll talk a little bit about the history of this poem. So it's called Erase. You want to erase me? Me. Have you met me? Have you witnessed the earth shifting every time I take a step? Have you witnessed the stars fluttering in awe? Have you not seen the way the wind embraces my curls, the clouds hover in prayer, the sun shining in gratitude? Or have you? Remove the T, remove the Q. They weren't for you anyways. Question all you like, honey, even 6 feet under, I breathe in land, stars welcoming me. There's no universe that forgets what has always been divine. Thank you. So that poem was written in response to Stonewall removing the T from their website. And it was like, Stonewall, girl, like you're only relevant because of us. Like, I mean, you can remove us, but like you don't exist without us. You're only relevant because of us. And I think right now there is a kind of wrap up before any final questions with this thought of there is so much gaslighting happening politically, right? And I've wanted to make a video about this, but I haven't been making videos because of how busy I've been with other organizing things. But this is something I learned as a child, right? So some people with autism, they can't lie, right? Like it just does not make sense for them. I am not one of those autistic people. I learned as a child that if I wanted something from my parents, let's say, for example, I wanted to, I don't know, do something like I want to go play outside. And my mom was very protective because she understood the violence of Arizona. Let's just put it that way. But as a child, I was like, what do you mean I can't be outside? Forgetting that every time I go outside, a white woman calls the cops on me as like a 7-year-old, right? Arizona, wild place. Anyways, so I learned that to get my parents to give me anything I wanted, I had to give them a very extreme option first. So I would go and be like, I am leaving forever. I will never come back. I'm living in a tent somewhere. Goodbye. And that meant that as they freaked out about this living situation of mine, when I wanted to play outside, no one had a problem with me playing outside. Me and the family are working on this relationship that we have built because it's not always healthy to have a threatening based relationship. But some of us had to do that as children. I feel like some people can relate to that and some people really cannot relate to that, but it doesn't matter. I got outside. The thing is, though, we're in that same political moment, right? Of let me throw like fire everywhere and talk about leaving for the rest of time forever when I'm going to destroy everything that's really close to you, right? That's right there that you're not focused on because you're focused on this giant fire that's happening. And within politics, we're seeing that, right? And what we're seeing is that it's utilizing institutions that we actually don't like as marginalized people, targeting those institutions and then having people fight to salvage those institutions that have never served us well in the first place, and forgetting that actually we're supposed to be supporting people all the way here. And so you can think of examples with like Harvard. Y'all, we fucking hate Harvard. Harvard is a horrible, horrible place. But Harvard fighting the federal government, everyone's like, oh my God, let's donate money to Harvard. And like, girl, they have billions of dollars in an endowment, right? Like all these institutions do. And so, but people are like, oh, but they're taking $40 million of funding away from this. Okay. Like their endowment can buy entire states. Like their endowments are bigger than like the entire like wealth of countries. But so many people see that fire, right? And we go towards it, right? And people are talking about like saving the HRC and like the LGBTQ task force. And they're like, we have to keep these institutions. I'm like, for who? Like, and I'm not saying let's get rid of them entirely. Well, let's redistribute things and move things around. However, it creates these systems, right, where we're focused on one area when the violence is happening on another to get something done. And again, I understand that because that is a tool I have used with my family, right? And I want to invite people to really think about those things of every time that you're really freaking out about something, but like, what is the thing? Do you really understand the thing? And like, I will say, of almost everyone I talk to, like even people deep in this work, right? People who know better, right? And this is where like the mental health component of all of this comes in, right? Of like, just because we know something doesn't mean we react to the thing that we know, right? Like those are two completely different things, and those are two different paradigms of work. And I honor and accept that and fully honor it. But so even people really doing this work who understand how manipulative these systems are, how they will distract us in different ways, the amount of people that have been like, oh, like trans people's passports are being taken away, or they'll be like, this person's passport was taken away, like a trans person when they traveled. I'm like, okay, cool. Who took it? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, but where was it taken? I don't know. I'm like, okay, but like, I need more, right? Like, before we go around sharing some of this stuff, I need us to actually know things, because I'm like, okay, there's a difference. And as a person, right, who has been a global South citizen my entire life, who has dealt with immigration systems across the world, all of them violent. We hate all of them. Nation states are awful, right? But like, I know the difference between the person at like immigration taking your passport versus like an airline person versus like the embassy taking it versus somebody completely randomly taking it. Those are completely different things. We can't protect one another and address these things if we don't know, right? But so much of what's out there is just, here's this worst case scenario, and it's like, okay, but like everything could be addressed. Everything could be fought against. There's strategy across everything. And I'm not saying that this stuff isn't happening. It's totally happening. We know it's happening. But unless we know how it's happening, where it's happening, when it's happening, it's so much harder to try to protect ourselves from. Because just being afraid, fear is great. I'm totally a fan of fear. Fear allows us to continue surviving. Let's be afraid and do shit anyways. But that second part, I just need us to do the shit anyways. Because just the fear by itself, like, that doesn't help anyone. And so many places we're sharing a lot of fear without the other side of it, of like, okay, cool, like, but we can address all of it. There's always things we can do. There is no situation that's bad enough that there's nothing that we can do. And that's not saying that like we will eliminate the situation immediately. It's, I mean, we're seeing this with like the genocide in Palestine, right? Of like, what are we, 19 months in? 19, almost 20 months in, right? Of like, it hasn't gone away. And also, though, as a person who has been organizing for a really, really, really long time across multiple genocides and spaces, of like, I can also be like, okay, yes, it hasn't gone away. And also, maybe let's talk and address some of the things that didn't go well in our response and our organizing. Because there is no such thing as perfect organizing. That's not the point. But if we assume that the reason we've, like, if we genuinely believe that we did everything perfectly right and nothing has changed, that just devastates us. Versus actually, wait, like, there's a million other things that we have not done. There are strategies that people have been talking about since October 7th, since before October 7th, that we have not done in the vast majority of spaces. We know these things, right? Like, but very few places are willing to really have that conversation. Because so many places culturally, we view critique as like, how dare you? And I'm like, no, I will critique everything. But when I critique, I'm telling you, I will show up. Like, I will help you fix this. And if it's not me, I will hire someone to come help you fix this. But I will critique the amount of like community violence that we have within our communities. I will critique that, like, within like trans community, for example, we don't have a trans justice vision. We 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 don't, it doesn't exist, right? Like, and so we don't have a foundation to build off of. And so we can criticize those things, but to me, criticizing is like, okay, like, actually, we don't have a trans vision. Cool, what are we doing? Like, all right, cool, let's do it. Right? Like, it's, let's do it before pride. Right? Like, because we can. I wholeheartedly believe that. But coming at it from a place of like, actually, like, we're good, again, I feel like it's the same concept that we've been talking about this entire time, the last hour, of, if we believe that we are good we have robbed ourselves of any opportunity to move. And again, within the hundreds of conversations I am in of like, one, people are really exhausted, right? And totally burned out and a million other things. So I also get that. But a lot of places aren't really receptive to any of this, partially because of that, but also partially because we don't really know how to be receptive with these things because we're taught punishment versus accountability. Um, I do actually, on a final note, want to recommend an online workshop that do y'all know Alice Sparkly Cat? Oh my god, Alice Sparkly Cat is like the coolest person ever. I believe they're a non-binary astrologer who has a book called Decolonial Astrology, maybe. Yes. Okay. Yes. It's like one of the best books. Honestly, it's like not even just a book. To me, it's not even just a book that tells you about astrology and like decolonized aspects of it, but it's the best history of white supremacy that I have ever read. It's absolutely breathtaking. And so Alice has like a monthly group that people join and then does workshops every once in a while and has a specific workshop about Saturn entering Aries that's specifically about punishment versus accountability. I think it's next week or something. I don't know what it is, but it's all online. So I highly recommend that. But until we move away from that culture, we're not going to do this. But the reality is, we actually know how to do all of this. We do know how to end genocide. But the question is, are people willing to do the specific work to do it? Are we willing to build the foundations that are necessary? Most people are not there yet. Most of us are not there yet. And to me, that's not devastating and fills me with despair and everything. It makes me hate people sometimes, but it's also just, it will happen. I believe that. I've seen it happen in different ways. And yeah, it feels better to believe that versus actually this, because it hasn't happened yet, it will never happen. To me, I'm like, it will happen when we're ready because we're not ready for a free Palestine. We're not ready for trans justice. We're not ready for a world that's not ableist. We're not ready for a world that's not white supremacist and capitalist and so on and so forth. But we can get there. And I'm excited for the work that happens to get us there. So I'll end there unless there's any final questions. I don't know if there's anything from the online folks.
The online folks were just offering appreciations and Fiza says, big on, I don't have time for you if you're not doing good in the world.
Yes.
Wendell says, this is really speaking to me. Thank you for these amazing words. And Cassidy says, we love the self-appreciation. I also dropped links to Alice Sparkly Cat's workshop and her book, or their book. And we hosted them for a purely virtual event when that book came out. So that's on Charis's YouTube if folks want to go back and check it out. It was a really great discussion about that book. And it's one of our favorites here at Charis. Does anybody here have any thoughts or things? I'll bring you the mic if anybody wants to say anything. Well, we'll just offer our appreciation for you, Yaffa. Thank you so much for being here. We always think about all the different ways that people can plug in, right? Like, I think your point about like, we don't have time if you're not doing something. It's like, but the something can be wherever you are of use, right? Like, it does not have to be some giant thing. It just has to, like, think about what you're good at, right?
Yeah.
Where can you be of use? So, thank you to everybody who's watching at home. Joanna Wagner says, thank you so much. This was fantastic. So thanks to everybody watching. You can click the teal button at the bottom of the screen to buy Sage from Charis. We really do appreciate it when you buy your books from us. So thank you. And for all of y'all, you are welcome to hang out and chat with Yaffa a bit more and also explore the Refaat mobile library. Thank you, as always, to Refaat for being with us. And I hope everybody stays safe and well. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.